Welcome. Today we're opening up the research for a thorough examination of the life and really the devastating legal and personal challenges of Vicki Lynn Hogan, who the world came to know as Anna Nicole Smith.
We are charting a course through a life that spanned just 39 years, from 1967 to 2007.
So short.
Unbelievably short, but it was just packed with this trajectory of rapid fame, these extraordinary wealth disputes that actually made U.S. legal history, and just profound personal loss.
And that's such a crucial point, isn't it? The contrast between that tabloid persona and the serious legal precedent she ended up creating.
Exactly. Our sources really give us a roadmap through the highs of her career, the labyrinthine complexity of her legal battles, and the tragedy of her final months.
So our mission here is to provide you with the context, to pull out the key legal turning points, and really understand the facts around her public image and her private devastation. We're going to start at the very beginning, before the billboards, before the courtrooms. Vicki Lynn Hogan.
Vicki Lynn Hogan was born in Houston, Texas on November 28, 1967. But the research shows she was mainly raised by her mother and her family in a much smaller town, Mexia, Texas.
So a foundation that's, a world away from the life she would eventually lead.
A world away. And her early personal life, it moved very quickly. She dropped out of high school around 1984.
She was still so young.
Very. And by April 4, 1985, at just 17 years old, she married Billy Wayne Smith. He was 16 and worked as a cook at the local Jim's Crispy Fried Chicken, where she was also working.
Wow, a young couple starting out. But that chapter didn't last long, even if the paperwork took a while.
That's right. They separated the next year, but the divorce wasn't finalized until 1993. And what's most important, right in the middle of this early marriage, she gave birth to her son, Daniel Wayne Smith.
January 22, 1986.
Yes. And Daniel's birth was, you could argue, the single most important event of her entire life. The sources are clear on this. He was the center of her world, always.
So by the time she starts this transformation into the public figure we all recognize, she's already a young, single mother with this incredibly deep bond with her son. The modeling breakthrough in '92 must have felt like a total break from her life in Mexia.
It was an incredible pivot. Her career just launched when she became the Playboy magazine centerfold in May of 1992.
And that led directly to major recognition.
It did. In 1993, she won the title of Playmate of the Year. And to give you some context, she came after Corinna Harney and was followed by Jenny McCarthy.
So that places her right at the top of a certain kind of celebrity culture at that moment.
Absolutely. That title was the springboard, but it was the Guess campaign that really cemented her as a cultural icon, and it's what created the Anna Nicole persona.
She replaced Claudia Schiffer, who was a huge supermodel at the time.
A huge deal. She secured that contract to replace Schiffer in the Guess jeans ads, and what's fascinating is how deliberate the image creation was. The photographers immediately noted her striking resemblance to Jane Mansfield.
The blonde bombshell from the 1950s.
Exactly, and they leaned into it. They played up that look in the ads, and it was right then that she adopted the professional name Anna Nicole. It was, a very strategic, commercially successful move.
And it worked. Her image went global very fast.
It really did. In 1993, she was also modeling for H&M, the big Swedish clothing company. And the sources say her picture was on these enormous billboards all across Sweden and Norway.
You also saw her in magazines like Marie Claire and GQ. So from Texas to international recognition in, 2 years?
Basically, yes. And that kind of hyper-visibility, it leads to other things, endorsements. And those later created their own set of legal problems. The most notable one, of course, was Trim Spa.
Right, the diet product.
She became their spokeswoman in October 2003. This was a very high-profile campaign. She publicly claimed the product helped her lose a significant amount of weight.
69 pounds, I believe the sources said.
That's the number, yes. About 31 kilograms. And this was a massive success for the company. Her image was everywhere.
But it led to legal trouble? What were the allegations?
Well, Trim Spa and Smith were both named in a class action lawsuit. The main claim was that the marketing for the pill was false and misleading.
So they were basically saying the product didn't work as advertised.
Essentially, yes. The suit questioned its effectiveness and suggested the marketing relied too much on her personal claims without any real scientific proof. And what's telling is what happened later. Trim Spa eventually filed for bankruptcy and was liquidated after she died.
Which suggests the legal issues were pretty severe.
Very severe.
So moving on from modeling and endorsements, let's touch on her acting career. It was brief, but she worked with some major names right at the start.
That's right. She made her film debut in the Coen brothers movie, The Hudsucker Proxy, in 1994. She also had her first starring role in a film called To the Limit in 1995.
But here's that contradiction in her career again. While she's replacing supermodels and appearing in these big films, she's also being mocked.
Yes, the sources confirm that for her role in Naked Gun 3313, The Final Insult, which also came out in 1994, she received the Golden Raspberry Award for Worst New Star.
So this duality, it really defines her public persona. She's a global icon and, to some, a joke, all at the same time.
That's a perfect way to put it, and it's that contradiction that made her so compelling to the media and the public.
Okay, so the complexity we just mentioned, it just explodes into public view with her second marriage. This event defined her for a generation and set the stage for 2 decades of legal warfare. We're talking about her marriage to J. Howard Marshall.
Right, this is where her life becomes completely tied up with immense wealth and incredible scrutiny. She met J. Howard Marshall, an 86-year-old petroleum tycoon, in October 1991.
She was performing at a strip club in Houston at the time.
She was, and they married on June 27, 1994 in Houston. The age difference was, well, staggering. She was 26, he was 89.
And the media reaction was immediate and brutal.
Instantly, they branded her a gold digger. It was a label she denied her entire life, but that narrative was set in stone for the public.
And the controversy really ignited when he died just over a year later.
August 4th, 1995. He was 90 years old. And his death kicked off one of the most famous and certainly one of the longest probate battles in recent American history.
So, despite being his wife, she was left out of his written will. What is her legal claim based on?
Her whole case, everything, rested on her claim that Marshall had verbally promised her half of his estate.
A verbal promise.
A verbal promise. Specifically, half of his 16% interest in Koch Industries, which at the time was valued at an astounding $1.6 billion.
$1.5 billion. And who was fighting her on this?
His stepson, E. Pierce Marshall. He fought her claim at every turn. For a brief time, Anna Nicole actually aligned with Marshall's other son, J. Howard Marshall III, who was also disowned, but E. Pierce was the main adversary.
Okay, so let's try to untangle this legal maze because it gets very confusing. The whole fight started in a California bankruptcy court. Why there? Why not in Texas, where Marshall's estate was?
And this is the critical turn that eventually sent the case all the way to the Supreme Court. In 1996, Smith filed for bankruptcy in California.
This was over a completely separate issue, right?
Yes, it was an unrelated $850,000 judgment against her from a sexual harassment suit filed by a former nanny. But because any potential money from the Marshall estate was an asset, something that could pay off her debts, the California Bankruptcy Court claimed it had jurisdiction.
So she essentially used the bankruptcy filing as a procedural tool to pull the inheritance fight into the federal court system. That's a huge move.
It was a masterstroke, whether it was intentional or not. It let her bypass the state probate system in Texas, which is where these fights are usually settled, and the initial rulings were just wildly contradictory.
How contradictory are we talking?
We are talking diametrically opposed. In September of 2000, the LA bankruptcy judge, who was operating under federal law, awarded Smith a colossal sum. $449,754,134.
Almost $500 million.
Exactly. But at the very same time, a Houston probate court, a state court, affirmed a jury finding that Smith was entitled to absolutely nothing.
So she owes money in Texas, but is owed $500 million in California.
Precisely. The Texas court even ordered her to pay over $1 million in legal costs to E. Pierce Marshall. It was an impossible situation.
So how did the federal system try to resolve this?
Well, a federal district judge tried to find a middle ground. In March 2002, he threw out the massive bankruptcy award, but issued a new, reduced judgment for $88 million to Smith.
Still a huge amount of money.
A huge amount. But it was a temporary victory. E. Pierce Marshall immediately appealed that decision to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
And the Ninth Circuit sided with him.
They did. They reversed the award completely, and their reasoning was key. They argued that the federal courts simply lacked the jurisdiction to overrule a decision made by a state probate court.
So let me just clarify for you listening. The Ninth Circuit is basically saying, we don't care if a federal judge thinks she deserves $88 million. Legally, Texas gets to decide who inherits, and the federal courts can't interfere.
That is precisely the argument. They were citing something called the probate exception to federal jurisdiction. And this question of authority, of who gets to decide, is what launched her case to the U.S. Supreme Court.
It's an incredible legal footnote to such a sensational life.
It really is. In 2005, the Supreme Court agreed to hear her appeal on that single question of federal jurisdiction. The case became Marshall v. Marshall.
And the sources say the U.S. government, the Bush administration, actually intervened on her behalf. Why?
Because the issue was much bigger than the Marshall fortune. The government wanted to clarify and, frankly, expand federal court jurisdiction over these kinds of state disputes. It tells you how legally significant this procedural question was.
So what did the Supreme Court decide in 2006?
In a unanimous decision, they ruled in Smith's favor. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote the opinion. But, and this is so important to understand, this decision did not award her any money.
Not a single dollar.
Not a dollar. It just affirmed her right to keep pursuing her claim in the federal court system. It was a victory for federal jurisdiction, but not for her bank account.
She won the right to keep fighting. But the fight continued even after the original opponents were gone.
It's a really sad part of the story. E. Pierce Marshall, her main legal rival, died in June of 2006. His widow, Elaine, stepped in to continue the litigation.
And then Anna Nicole Smith herself died in early 2007.
And the case was then pursued on behalf of her only surviving heir, her infant daughter, Danny Lynn.
And it still wasn't over. It went back to the Supreme Court.
It went back. In 2011, in a case called Stern v. Marshall. This time the issue was slightly different. It wasn't about the probate exception, but about the constitutional authority of the bankruptcy courts themselves.
So the first case was, can the federal court even hear this? And the second was, did that specific bankruptcy judge have the power to issue that massive judgment in the first place?
Exactly. The core question was whether a bankruptcy court had the subject matter jurisdiction to make a final ruling on a claim like this.
And this time, the Supreme Court ruled against her estate.
Yes. In a 5-4 decision, they agreed that the bankruptcy court had overstepped its constitutional authority. It was a major decision that actually limited the power of bankruptcy judges across the country.
So after nearly 2 decades, 2 trips to the Supreme Court, years of headlines, and the deaths of the original litigants, what was the final financial outcome?
Nothing. In August 2014, a federal judge rejected the final efforts to get any money from the Marshall estate. Her legal legacy is entirely procedural. She set major legal precedent, but she never got a penny from the Marshall fortune.
So if the legal battle was complex and drawn out, the year 2006 was just hyper-intense and marked by unbelievable personal tragedy. All this was happening while she was pregnant.
Right, and the sources showed there were serious concerns about her health. A psychiatrist who met with her while she was pregnant concluded she had symptoms consistent with borderline personality disorder and was heavily reliant on prescription medications.
That context is so important, given what happened next. Her daughter, Danny Lynn, was born on September 7, 2006, in the Bahamas.
And just 3 days later, on September 10th, her 20-year-old son, Daniel, died. He was in his mother's hospital room visiting her and his new baby sister.
The devastation from that it's just hard to comprehend. Daniel wasn't just her son, he was her constant, her anchor.
Absolutely. The accounts from people close to her paint a picture of a total emotional collapse. Her attorney, Howard K. Stern, described Anna and Daniel as inseparable. He said Daniel was, without question, the most important person in her life.
That bond makes the descriptions of her grief just so heartbreaking. Stern's testimony about the funeral, it shows a mother in the most desperate state of mourning.
Stern said that at Daniel's funeral, she had them open the coffin and she physically tried to climb inside. She said she wanted to be buried with him. He concluded that emotionally, Anna Nicole died when Daniel died.
That's a powerful statement.
Daniel was buried in the Bahamas on October 19, 2006.
We should also state the official cause of Daniel's death, because it was a drug-related tragedy that fed into the concerns about his mother's health.
The autopsy found he died from an accidental combined drug overdose. The substances included methadone and antidepressants. A Bahamian jury ruled the death accidental.
So in the middle of this profound grief, the media focus shifts immediately to the paternity of her newborn daughter, Danny Lynn. The environment must have been pure chaos.
It was a spectacle. Howard K. Stern initially claimed he was the father, and he was even listed on the Bahamian birth certificate.
But the list of potential fathers grew very quickly.
It did. The entertainment photographer Larry Burkhead filed a lawsuit claiming he was the father. Then you had others step forward. Zagabor's husband, Frederick Princeson Anhalt, and her former bodyguard, Alexander Denk.
It was a bizarre situation. A U.S. judge ordered DNA tests, but then Smith died, and the legal maneuvering over her body became, well, macabre.
It's a grim detail. After her death, Burkhead's lawyer asked for an emergency DNA sample from her body. That was denied, but a judge did order her body to be preserved to make sure evidence wasn't lost.
And the paternity issue was resolved a few months later.
Yes, in April 2007, a Bahamian judge ruled that DNA tests proved Larry Burkhead was the biological father. Howard K. Stern didn't contest it, which allowed Burkhead to return to the U.S. with Danny Lynn.
And amidst all this chaos and grief, you have the strange commitment ceremony between Smith and Stern.
Yes. On September 28, 2006, just weeks after Daniel's death, they exchanged vows and rings in an informal ceremony in the Bahamas. And it's critical to note, this was not a legal marriage.
The timing is just so questionable. What was the motivation?
Her attorney in Nassau said it was for an adrenaline boost to give her a moment of focus after the devastation. But regardless of the motivation, the photos of the ceremony were sold to People magazine for a reported $1 million.
Let's also talk about her residency in the Bahamas, which was its own controversy. She was apparently there to avoid the U.S. paternity testing.
She was trying to establish permanent residency, yes. She was granted it by the immigration minister, Shane Gibson, based on her claim that she owned a $900,000 mansion.
But that ownership was immediately challenged.
It was. A former boyfriend, Gaither Ben Thompson, claimed he'd only loaned her the money for the property, and he sued to get it back. He eventually won a default judgment.
And this situation showed how precarious her finances really were.
Exactly. And the political fallout in the Bahamas was significant. Photos surfaced of the immigration minister, Gibson, in an embrace with Smith, which raised a lot of questions. He eventually had to resign.
There's also a chilling detail from when that mansion was being reclaimed, something that hinted at her pharmaceutical dependencies.
Yes. When they were inventorying the property, reports say that in her bedroom refrigerator they found a large bottle of methadone, vials of injectable vitamin B12, and bottles of Slim Fast.
That combination of painkillers, vitamins, and diet aids, it really foreshadows her final days. A desperate attempt to manage physical pain, emotional distress, and her public image all at once.
It paints a very bleak picture.
The end of this intense besieged life came in February 2007. She was found unresponsive on February 8th in her room at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel in Hollywood, Florida.
She was just 39 years old. Her bodyguard and his wife, who was a registered nurse, performed CPR. She was rushed to the hospital, but she was pronounced dead.
And because of her fame and her son's recent death, the forensic investigation was intense. What did the official findings conclude?
The Broward County Medical Examiner, Dr. Joshua Perper, ruled the cause of death was combined drug intoxication, and he classified it as an accidental overdose. He was very clear that it was not a homicide, not a suicide, and not a natural death.
And what was the specific component that proved fatal?
The major component was the sleeping medication chloral hydrate. It became fatally toxic when it interacted with a cocktail of other prescription drugs in her system.
Specifically 4 different benzodiazepines.
Yes, plus diphenhydramine, which is an antihistamine, and topiramate, a very dangerous combination. And the investigation also confirmed no illegal drugs were found in her system.
What about methadone, given the history there?
It was present in trace amounts in her bile, which suggested she'd taken it a couple of days prior, but it was definitively ruled not a contributing factor to her death.
And the autopsy also cited other factors, things that showed the severe stress her body was under.
It did. It cited abscesses on her buttocks, likely from injections of vitamin B12 and human growth hormone, and also that she was suffering from viral enteritis, which is an inflammation of the intestines. Her system was just weakened.
But the most disturbing part of the findings relates to where the drugs came from. Most weren't even prescribed to her.
This raised huge red flags. 8 of the 11 drugs in her system, including the fatal chloral hydrate, were prescribed to Howard K. Stern or under aliases.
Which points to a pattern of getting these drugs outside of normal medical practice. Who was writing the prescriptions?
According to the medical examiner, they were all written by her friend and psychiatrist, Dr. Christina Roshevich.
And that relationship became the focus of a lot of investigations later on.
It did. There was also scrutiny on Dr. Sandeep Kapoor, who had prescribed her methadone during her pregnancy. He defended his treatment as sound and appropriate, suggesting it was medically necessary.
After her death, the focus shifted to her final resting place.
Anna Nicole Smith's funeral was on March 10, 2007, in the Bahamas. She was buried next to her son, Daniel, which was her wish.
Even after her death, the legal shadow she cast continued, especially with her will, which was written back in 2001.
The will was filed in Los Angeles, and it named only one beneficiary, her son Daniel. It specifically excluded any other children, and it named Howard K. Stern as the executor.
The detail that just leaps out is the value of the estate compared to the billion-dollar fight she was in. The irony is just staggering.
It really is. The will said her personal property was valued at just $10,000. Her real estate was valued at $1.8 million, but it had a $1.1 million mortgage on it.
She died fighting for $1.5 billion, but her actual estate was barely solvent.
And because Daniel had already passed away, Danny Lynn, as the sole surviving heir, effectively became the beneficiary under probate law.
The legal battles didn't stop there. Her own mother, Virgie Arthur, filed a lawsuit.
She did. In 2008, she filed a defamation lawsuit against TMZ, Entertainment Tonight, and CBS. She was trying to get custody of Danny Lynn and claimed the media was conspiring to ruin her reputation.
But that lawsuit was dismissed.
Yes, the defendants won summary judgment, which effectively ended her legal challenge against the press.
Despite the end of the court cases and her life, Anna Nicole Smith's story remains incredibly potent culturally. It clearly taps into something enduring about fame, wealth, and tragedy.
Her legacy has been explored over and over. There have been multiple biographical films. There was a 2023 Netflix documentary, Anna Nicole Smith, You Don't Know Me.
And her life even inspired an opera. That's a truly unique place in cultural history.
It is. The opera Anna Nicole by Mark Anthony Turnage premiered in London in 2011. It was this major artistic attempt to distill her life into a high art form, and the story continues to be told.
So looking back at everything, the rise, the legal battles, the devastating loss of her son, and the accidental end, the narrative is one of incredible spectacle, but also immense fragility.
I think the most enduring insight here is the profound gap between the public fight and the private reality. I mean, her legal battle reaches the U.S. Supreme Court twice, setting precedent on fundamental questions of federal power. This was a fight for a $1.6 billion fortune.
Right.
But the personal devastation that followed her son's death was absolute, and she died with an estate that was barely above debt. The irony is just inescapable. She spent 2 decades fighting for wealth she never got, and her lasting legacy isn't one of riches, but of procedural law.
A legacy entirely separate from the personal turmoil that consumed her. It really makes you think about the cost of living such a public life in pursuit of a dream that was always just out of reach.
A powerful summation of the sources and the complexity of her very short life. Thank you for guiding us through this examination of the facts.
Thanks for listening.